The wolf's growl cut through the winter silence like a knife through sinew. Luke Mercer halted his horse with a slight pressure of his knees, head tilting toward the sound. The vast northern Arizona territory stretched around him, empty, white, and unforgiving beneath the December sky. A second sound followed, higher and distinctly human, a child's cry. Luke dismounted in one fluid motion, Winchester rifle sliding from its saddle holster into practiced hands. 3 winters alone had taught him to move with purpose in this country. Hesitation killed faster than cold. "Easy, Buck," he murmured to the horse. "Won't be long." His boots crunched through the frost-hardened earth as he followed the sounds through sparse juniper and scrub oak. The wind had teeth today, biting through his coat and carrying the scent of pine and snow yet to fall. He spotted them in a small clearing between rocks, 2 Apache children, girls no older than 6 or 7, huddled against a boulder, 10 yards away. A gray wolf circled, ribs visible beneath its winter coat, hunger overriding caution. The older girl had positioned herself in front, one small arm extended protectively across her sister. Luke raised the Winchester in a single, smooth movement. The wolf sensed him then, yellow eyes flashing as it turned with hackles raised. The rifle crack shattered the stillness, echoing across the empty landscape. The wolf collapsed mid-snarl, a puff of breath its final contribution to the world. The girls remained frozen, dark eyes darting between him and the fallen animal. Luke lowered his weapon slowly and crouched to their level. "You're safe now," he said softly, the gentleness in his voice unfamiliar even to himself. "Wolf can't hurt you no more." He unscrewed his canteen and offered it. The older girl hesitated, studying him with eyes too wary for her age. Before accepting, she let her sister drink first. Their deerskin clothing was worn thin, inadequate against the winter cold. Luke shrugged out of his coat and held it out. "Storm's coming. My cabin's not far." The older girl took the coat without a word, wrapping it around them both. The younger one's gaze remained fixed on his face, searching for something only she could name. When Luke stood to lead them back toward his horse, her small hand reached out and caught the rough fabric of his sleeve. The unexpected contact sent a jolt through him, a sensation like remembered warmth. Buck snorted as they approached, but stood steady as Luke lifted the girls onto the saddle. The sky had darkened, heavy clouds promising snow before nightfall. His decision was made for him. Finding their people would have to wait. "Hold tight," he instructed, taking the reins to lead Buck toward home. The cabin appeared through thickening snowfall, a simple structure of hand-hewn logs with a stone chimney that leaked a thin trail of smoke. Not much to look at, but solid against the coming storm. The sight stirred no particular feeling in Luke. It had been shelter, not home, for 3 long years. The cabin door creaked open to reveal a sparse interior, one room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner, and little else to suggest permanent habitation. A single photograph in a wooden frame sat on the mantel, the sole decoration in an otherwise utilitarian space. Luke settled the girls near the hearth, adding logs to build the fire higher. "Get warm," he said. "I'll find something to eat." The older girl kept her sister close, watching Luke's every move as he put a pot of beans to heat and sliced bread from a loaf. Their whispered exchange in Apache created a strange intimacy in the cabin that had known only silence. The younger girl's attention wandered to the photograph. She pointed, a question in her eyes. Luke's throat tightened. "That was my wife," he said. "Sarah. She's gone now." Gone. Such a simple word for the devastation of watching Sarah hemorrhage after their stillborn son arrived. For the twin graves he dug behind the missionary hospital. For his decision to vanish into the wilderness rather than return to their homestead in Colorado. The girls ate cautiously, the older one tasting each spoonful before allowing her sister to eat. Luke observed them from his chair, noting how the smaller one's eyelids grew heavy in the warmth. The older maintained her vigilance, even as exhaustion pulled at her. "You got names?" he asked, not expecting an answer. The older girl hesitated. "Tala," she said finally. "She Winona." "Luke," he replied, tapping his chest. "Luke Mercer." Tala nodded once, acknowledgement rather than acceptance. As darkness settled outside, Winona curled against her sister and surrendered to sleep. Tala fought it longer, her chin dipping, then jerking upward repeatedly until she too succumbed. Luke spread his bedroll near the fire for them and retreated to his own bed. The familiar emptiness of the cabin had been disrupted, filled now with the sound of small breaths and occasional murmurs. He stared at the ceiling beams, remembering other sounds, Sarah's laughter, her humming as she worked, their conversations that stretched into night, for the first time in years. The silence didn't press against him like a physical weight. Dawn broke with the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Luke came fully awake in an instant, years of solitude having honed his senses to any disturbance. The girls still slept by the banked fire as he pulled on his boots and lifted the rifle from its place by the door. On the porch, cold air bit into his lungs. A lone rider approached through the fresh snow, a woman on a paint pony, her dark hair braided beneath a faded red blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She halted at the edge of the clearing, assessing the cabin and the man who stood watching her. The cabin door creaked behind him. Tala appeared, eyes widening at the sight of the rider. "Inali," she cried, the word bursting from her like a prayer. Both girls rushed past Luke, Winona stumbling in her haste as they ran toward the woman who had already dismounted and dropped to her knees in the snow. Their voices rose in rapid Apache, too quick for Luke to catch more than a word or two. The woman's arms encircled them both, her face pressed against their hair, shoulders shaking with silent emotion. When she looked up, her gaze met Luke's across the distance. Pride and caution warred in her expression as she rose, keeping the girls close to her sides. "You helped them," she said in careful English. "I am Naya." Luke nodded. "Wolf had him cornered, brought him here out of the storm. The debt is mine." Nia's voice carried quiet strength. "Our way says life saved must be repaid." Luke frowned. "No debt, just did what needed doing." Nia studied him, taking his measure. "You are alone here." It wasn't a question, but Luke answered anyway. 3 years now. "My husband died fighting bluecoats. My father was white trader. I belong to neither world now." She squared her shoulders. "I offer service in your home for my daughters' lives." The implication hung in the cold air between them. Luke's jaw tightened. "Don't work that way for me, ma'am. You don't owe me." "You misunderstand," Naya replied. "I have nowhere to return. My people cast me out for mixed blood. White settlers see only Apache. A woman alone faces death in these lands." Her voice remained steady. "This is not payment. It is survival." Luke looked past her to the endless white landscape. A storm was building on the horizon. He'd spent 3 years avoiding entanglement with others, and now this woman offered complications he wasn't sure he wanted. "Where you headed then?" he asked. "North, to find my husband's cousin near Colorado border." Naya glanced at the threatening sky. Journey of many days. Luke considered the thin faces of the girls, the approaching storm, the long miles of hostile territory that lay between here and the Colorado border. Spring, he said finally. You can winter here till spring thaw, then decide. Nia's expression revealed nothing, but she nodded once. Until spring. Weeks passed, and the cabin's rhythms changed. Nia's presence brought order to spaces Luke hadn't noticed needed tending. She mended tears in his shirts without comment, reorganized his meager supplies for efficiency, and stretched their provisions with knowledge of edible winter plants. The girls adapted faster than the adults. Winona shadowed Luke during his chores, solemnly handing him tools or holding nails when he repaired the lean-to. Tala maintained a cautious distance, but her sharp eyes missed nothing. She began learning English words, collecting them like treasures. "What's this called?" she asked one evening, pointing to the chess pieces Luke had carved years earlier and never used. "Chess," Luke answered. "It's a game." "Teach me," Tala demanded. And so he did. One afternoon in late January, visitors arrived without warning. 2 men from the settlement 20 miles east. Frank Miller and Jim Dawson had traded with Luke occasionally, a relationship built on minimal interaction and mutual disinterest. "Heard you had company." "Mercer," Miller called as they dismounted, his gaze fixed on Nia, who stood in the doorway. "Didn't figure you for taking up with Indians. Their business is their own." "Frank," Luke replied evenly. "What brings you out here?" "Thought you should know there's talk." Dawson spat tobacco juice into the snow. "Army's been having trouble with renegades up north. Some folks getting nervous about Indians hiding out." "Nobody's hiding," Luke said. "Just waiting out winter is all." Miller's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Colonel Bradley's got a militia forming, talking about cleaning house come spring." He nodded toward Nia. "Best not get too comfortable with your arrangement." After they departed, tension lingered like gun smoke. Nia's face remained composed, but her knuckles had whitened around the wooden spoon she held. "They fear what they do not understand," she said quietly. "It has always been so." That evening, after the girls slept, Nia spoke of her life, her education at a mission school, her marriage against both families' wishes, the loss of her husband and their home. "I have walked between worlds my entire life," she said, fingers working a piece of sinew into braided cordage. "Too white for my mother's people, too Apache for my father's." Luke watched her hands, steady and sure in their task. "Those men won't decide what happens here," he said. "They already have," Nia replied. "Their minds see only what they expect to see." Luke poured coffee for them both. "What do you see when you look ahead to spring?" Nia's gaze met his across the small table. "I see snow that must melt before new growth comes. I see paths that may open or close. I see my daughters safe." She paused. "What do you see? Luke Mercer?" The question settled in him like a stone dropping through still water. For 3 years, he'd seen nothing ahead but empty days strung together. Now the future held shapes he couldn't quite define. "Don't know yet," he answered honestly, "but I'm starting to look." A wolf's howl pierced the pre-dawn darkness, close enough that Luke jerked awake, reaching for his rifle before consciousness fully claimed him. Nia was already moving, bow in hand, silently waking the girls and guiding them to the corner furthest from the windows. Outside, shadows moved through the dim light. 5, maybe 6 wolves circling the small corral where Buck stamped nervously. Hunger had made them bold, driving them to risk approaching the cabin in search of food. "They have been watching," Nia said, checking her bow. 3 days now. Luke hadn't noticed, a realization that bothered him more than the wolves. "How'd you know?" "I listen," she replied simply. She handed Tala a quiver of arrows. "Stand ready." They positioned themselves, Luke at the front door, Naya at the side window. The wolves continued circling, tightening their formation around the corral. When the first animal lunged at the rough-hewn fence, Luke's shot dropped it mid-leap. The crack of the rifle scattered the pack momentarily, but hunger overrode caution. A second wolf darted toward the chicken coop at the side of the cabin. Nia's arrow caught it in the throat before it reached the flimsy door. The remaining wolves regrouped, more cautious now, but unwilling to abandon their hunt. As dawn lightened the eastern sky, Luke spotted new movement beyond the trees, riders approaching. 4 men with rifles across their saddles. Frank Miller led them. "Got more trouble," Luke muttered, nodding toward the riders. Naya's expression hardened. "The wolves we know are not always the most dangerous." The men halted at the edge of the clearing. Miller raised a hand in mock greeting. "Thought we heard shooting." "Mercer," he called. "Came to see if you needed help." His eyes flicked to Nia at the window. "Bow still ready. Though seems like your squaw's handling things." "Got it under control," Luke answered, stepping from the porch. "Do you?" asked a bearded man behind Miller. "Way I hear it, you've gone native, living with Indians, turning your back on your own kind." "My property, my business," Luke said. His rifle remained pointed downward but ready. "Appreciate the concern, but you can ride on." "Maybe we don't feel like riding," Miller replied. "Maybe we came to have a word about the Apache problem in these parts." He nodded toward the cabin. "Colonel says all Indians need to be on reservation land. Those that ain't are fair game." The wolves had withdrawn to the tree line, but remained visible, watching. Luke found himself caught between 2 threats, neither willing to retreat. "This woman and her daughters are under my protection," he stated, raising his voice to carry to all the riders. "Any man who threatens them answers to me." Miller's face darkened. "You choosing them over your own kind, Mercer?" "I'm choosing what's right," Luke replied. "You boys do the same and ride out." A tense silence stretched between them. Behind, Luke sensed Nia moving to the doorway. The soft creak of her bowstring pulled tight. The bearded man spat into the snow. "You're making a mistake. Mercer, spring's coming, and things are going to change." He glanced toward the wolves watching from the trees. "Not all predators are so easy to spot." Miller nodded curtly. "We'll be seeing you." The riders departed with the rising sun, their threats hanging in the cold air. As they disappeared into the trees, the wolf pack finally melted away as well, leaving only bloody snow and silence behind. Nia's hand found Luke's arm, her touch tentative. "They will return," she said quietly. Luke nodded. "Reckon so." "When spring comes," she began. "Spring's just a season," Luke interrupted. "Doesn't decide anything for us." Her fingers tightened briefly on his sleeve before withdrawing. "Us," she repeated, the word carrying a question. Luke looked at the cabin, no longer the empty shelter he'd retreated to in grief, but something transforming into a home. At the doorway, Tala and Winona watched, their faces solemn but unafraid. "Us," he confirmed. April brought the first wildflowers pushing through melting snow around the cabin. The structure itself had changed. Crude carvings decorated the porch posts where Tala practiced with her new knife. Winona's collection of pine cones and unusual stones lined the windowsills, and bundles of herbs hung from the rafters where Nia had placed them to dry. Luke sat on the porch steps, mending a bridle while watching Winona chase a butterfly through fresh grass. Inside, he could hear Nia and Tala speaking in mixed Apache and English, their voices a comfortable backdrop to his work. Spring had arrived as promised, the season of departure, according to their winter arrangement. Nia joined him on the steps, her presence familiar now in ways he couldn't have imagined months earlier. They sat in companionable silence, watching Winona's exploration of the emerging world. "The pass will be clear soon," Nia said finally. Journey north would be possible. Luke's hands stilled on the leather. "That's still what you want?" "Want is luxury I have not permitted myself." She smoothed her skirt, a gesture he'd come to recognize as her gathering thoughts. For years, survival was enough. And now? Now I wonder what grows after winter ends. Her gaze met his directly. "What do you see when you look ahead, Luke Mercer?" He'd asked himself the same question each day as spring approached. The answer had been forming slowly, like ice thawing on the creek. 3 years I've been half alive," he said, walking through days without feeling them. "Then you and the girls came, and—" He gestured toward the cabin, the cleared yard, the small garden plot they'd prepared together. This place was shelter. Now it's something else. "And if men like Miller return?" "They will," Luke acknowledged. "And we'll face that too." "We," Nia repeated, just as she had months earlier, but this time with certainty rather than question. The next day, beneath the old cottonwood tree, where tiny leaves had just unfurled, Luke and Nia stood with the girls as witnesses. No preacher, no paper, no rings, just hands clasped and words exchanged, a promise as binding as any church ceremony. "You saved my daughters from wolves," Nia said, her voice steady and sure. "But you saved me from a life without hope. That is a debt that can only be repaid with a lifetime." Luke's throat tightened. No debt between us now, just choice. Travelers passing through the territory in years to come would speak of the family at the crossroads cabin, the quiet white man with watchful eyes, his Apache wife whose knowledge of plants could heal or harm, their daughters who moved between worlds with unusual grace. Some whispered that militia groups had once planned to drive them out, but the attempt was never made. Perhaps it was the growing number of friends who visited the cabin regularly. Or perhaps it was the quiet knowledge that Luke Mercer's protection extended to his chosen family with unwavering resolve. What remained certain was this: within those cabin walls, something rare had taken root and flourished, a home claimed not by blood or birth, but by hearts that recognized each other across boundaries others could not cross. And in a land where winter's grip could last beyond seasons, they had found the warmest truth of all, that family forms not from obligation, but from the choice to remain when paths of departure lie open.